DJ of 7.
And even a gate that drags this way, how are you supposed to enter if the gate is constantly closed? So how are we thinking about even the entryway into a park? And once at the park, what kind of swings do you have? Because we've had to fight for our public parks to have swings that are ADA accessible so that all children can enjoy the swing. And what other play features do we have? And what kind of walkways do we have? Is it only grass where you can't get through in a wheelchair? Do you have certain parts that are a pathway that is concrete so that a wheelchair can easily access and navigate through the park? So there's a lot of design features that those who are able-bodied may not really always think about, but we know that with you at the table that we would have that. And I just also want to answer the person who was speaking on the Zoom that I think there's three things that we have to uncouple. First and foremost, I understand and hear all of your frustrations that you look at elected officials and you're like, why haven't you done anything? Well, if it was so easy, Antonio and I would have done it, and Assemblymember Claire Valdez. But the truth is, at the end of the day, the agencies that we're talking about, right, the MTA, the Parks Department, those answer only to the executive, which is the mayor and the governor. Unfortunately, we are not the mayor nor the governor, and I don't have the free-willing magic wand to be like, hey, commissioner of so-and-so agency, go and do that. The only thing that I can do is to have oversight over the agency and have a hearing to say, hey, you're doing this wrong. And we also go into a fight and negotiation with the agency to say, hey, you need to pass these bills because you are not doing your job. And that takes a lot of organizing and coalition building, which means that we have to have a supermajority to pass those bills. So bureaucracy is not easy, and it is easy to point fingers and blame other people for things that aren't getting done. But any government system, the processes exist, and we have to learn to navigate them and also always be innovative to think about how we're going to fix it. But long story short, I want to say that for the Woodside stations, we have the elevator and the escalators that are coming in currently planned. And just because we don't currently see construction for all of them, it doesn't mean that we can't fight for the funding, because by law, every single one of them have to be ADA accessible. But the timeline that we currently have is not acceptable, so we have to figure out how to get more funding, like congestion pricing at full price like we originally had proposed, and other streams of revenue, and federal funding especially, to make sure that we have funding to get all these elevators and escalators installed on time, in a timely manner, at every single station. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that question. I want to talk about activism and actually getting things done. And I think there's a balance here, and Kumar is right. It's just we need to get things done, and elected officials have to be able to move things forward. Right now, Brooklyn will be the only borough in the entire city in which every single District 75 school will have a sensory room. It's the only borough in the entire city in which no parent has to go to a school that's 2 or 3 neighborhoods away. Sorry. I think it's a mistake. They didn't mute themselves. But we're going to be the only borough in which it doesn't matter where you live, your closest D75 school is going to have the resources necessary for young kids to be able to not only enjoy themselves with a sensory room, but also be prepared to start their day in a deregulated state, being able to get regulated and be able to get the experience and the opportunity to start learning immediately. That happens here. I saw an issue and I handled it. I dealt with it. And what you're going to hear a lot from me is every single time there was an opportunity to affect meaningful change in people's lives, I didn't only advocate, I didn't only march, I didn't only protest, I actually got something done. So not only did we fight for congestion pricing, and was I the first borough president to support supporting congestion pricing, when our kids with disabilities didn't have access to resources and rooms like sensory rooms, I got that done as well. Every time there's an issue, we figure out a way to make meaningful change in people's lives. So yes, I think parks is the next a next step and a place where we need to go. I've been trying to get a wheelchair accessible swing in Cooper Park for 12 years now. And I've been told by the Department of Parks that we can't get it done, which I don't believe. I want to be very clear. I think they're full of it. Before I leave here, and I'm talking about my position as a borough president, we will make sure that there is an accessible wheelchair swing in Cooper Park. And what happens there is that the leadership we currently have is a lot different than the leadership of the past. These folks have very small minds and narrow minds when it comes to innovation like that. And what we need is folks that can think outside of the box, that can think big, that are not limited by the traditions and the customs of the leaders of the past. I actually think we have a promising opportunity with Mayor Mamdani to think differently and ask for things that we might have not asked before. So I'm looking forward to advocating for more accessibility and opportunities for young children that are disabled or are neurodivergent in parks. But again, I've already done the job, and Brooklyn is going to be the most, District 75 friendly borough in the entire city because of our advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, President, for building up schools. Students with disabilities are suspended at a far higher rate than their peers, and many are denied IEP accommodations. How are you, what legislation would you support to ensure that schools are compliant with the Students with Disabilities Act and are held accountable?
So I don't believe in suspensions outside of schools for any reason. I think at that point you failed your job as an administrator and as a teacher, and we have to have serious conversation about restorative justice opportunities, peer-to-peer restorative justice opportunities, and really looking to maintain our schools as educational and academic institutions, not as entryways into the prison system or into entryways into a prison pipeline. And the only way to do that is to hold our schools to a higher standard, to think that a student in any way, shape, or form, whether they're disruptive, whether they're disruptive or they're having behavior issues, that's a challenge for us to solve for those problems in a serious and thoughtful way, not an opportunity to make that problem, not make it so that you don't have to solve for those issues. So I'm a big fan of restorative justice practices. I want more guidance counselors in schools. My first bill that I ever passed in the city council was to add one guidance counselor for every 250 students in our education system. Then I learned about preemption and found out that the state would have to do that, but because of my advocacy, they opened up the deputy chancellor's office for guidance counselors because of the work that we were able to do. Now we have a deputy chancellor focused only and solely on that. And that's action again. Every time there's an issue that we have to solve for, I put forth legislation and affected meaningful change in people's lives. It's another example of when I saw that mostly Black, brown, and children with disability were the ones that were getting suspended at a higher rate. And I looked at those schools, they had less guidance counselors than the schools where we saw lower suspension rates. So I decided to act, and now we have more guidance counselors than ever. We have a guidance counselor's office in the Department of Education, all because of my advocacy and legislation that I was able to pass. My first piece of legislation. Thank you.
The first time a parent walked into my office to seek support because their child had been suspended for quote unquote erratic behavior in school was the first time that I realized that this wasn't about behavior. What it was that teachers, guidance counselors, principals, our educators didn't actually know how to engage with their students. We had to go to a hearing. We had to file a lawsuit. We had to go to a hearing after hearing to get IEPs for our students. This is a failure of the administration. We have a federal law, right, that's supposed to, the IDEA, is supposed to provide funding that's never been anywhere close to fully federally funded to ensure that that schools have the resources that they need to provide strong learning environments for every single student. But that doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Does that happen in every school across the city? No, right? There's some schools in some neighborhoods that are doing just fine because they have all the resources they need, because the way schools are funded is by property taxes, right? Property taxes that are very hyper-local to those communities. And so those schools have more resources. Which schools are chronically underfunded and therefore have these higher rates that our borough president just talked about? These are the schools that are for mostly Black and brown communities. And we see this trend over and over again. So this isn't just about getting more guidance counselors or driving more resources. This is about thinking about how it is that we actually fund education. Why is it that education in schools are only funded by property taxes local to your community? Why is it that this can't be communal? This is just like the way that we've continued to allow affordable housing and AMI metrics to be guided by this larger community. Has anybody ever sought to get affordable housing in New York and they do this test of the area median income, which includes like Westchester as well and other parts outside the city, and you're like, wait, this isn't actually local to this community at all. So if we can think about creative ways that we're actually funding the things that we need, like schools, instead of just assuming that this should continue to be the way that it is, then perhaps we'll actually get the resources necessary to do more than just get us guidance counselors, but actually build the learning environments where kids can thrive. And I understand that government is a bureaucracy and that it can be hard to impact change and that you have to have public hearings, and I appreciate all of that. But I also think we need to see real leadership when it comes to coming up with the innovative ideas that can cut through that instead of just accepting that that's the way that things are going to continue to be.
I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna move on.
So for our school system right now, when we talk about the federal government, what's going to be really important is how we acknowledge the systemic change at large by the Republican Party right now. Donald Trump has completely gutted our Department of Education, and there is no agency anymore. Anyone who wasn't laid off has now been furloughed or has been moved into a different agency. That is pretty horrific. As a product of public school and public education, and as a beneficiary of that, I'm mortified. So that means that we have to look at the public education system at large on how it's being defunded and it's being privatized. They're being told to go to private school and you'll get a refund. And it's the same exact thing for those who are applying for an IEP and those who are twice exceptional or those who need to make sure that they have other needs that are met. And what we're seeing is the Carter cases. It costs us over $10 billion every single year for the Department of Education because of exactly what we've heard the other candidates say on the stage, is that we have to sue the public education system to get the money back for sending our child to a private school because our public schools simply are not equipped to make sure that these students are getting the education that is well-rounded and needed for their experience. That's pretty horrific from top down. And what we've seen with new leadership, as the borough president has said, within the last 4 years that I've been in office, we've invested over $19 million to our public schools to make sure that they have sensory rooms and other ADA accessibility needs met, so that the children who are attending the schools really feel part of the education community. We've also opened up 2 new District 75 schools in my district to make sure from K to 8 that they are feeling at home. In addition to that, we also have a partnership with the Riverview School, where they have education for high school students and also just workforce readiness for those who are in high school to be ready to become independent as adults with needs and need for assistance. And we've also partnered with Birch, where Birch was the first nonprofit partner that was able to figure out the federal, state, and city funding to build housing for adults who have special needs. So I think that we have to look at the system at large because there is a lot to be fixed. There's a lot of investments needed, and at every level we have to make sure that we're carving out a certain percentage to make sure that we are investing, because legislation can take time, legislation can become outdated very quickly, but we have to make sure that we're investing to make sure that those who have the needs are being met. And also I love the timer. It kind of feels like I'm being timed, but I think it's unrelated.
Yeah, sorry about that, so just to keep it moving. So, millions of deaths, millions of individuals in the deaf and blind community rely on interpreters and captioners, but there are only 10,000 of them nationwide. What legislation would you put in place to support ASL interpreters at the education level, housing, learning, and all aspects of accessibility? Could start with Claire Valdez.
No, it's a really important question, and thank you to our interpreters who are here this evening and our captioner for doing this essential work to make sure that this forum is accessible to as many people as possible. I think that we can look at a lot of different levers here to make sure that we're encouraging people to go into this field, which is so crucially needed for so many different constituencies all over the country and right here in New York 7. We can look at government subsidies. We can look at additional workforce development. We can look at accreditation, given that has government support to make sure that people can take the training they need to become interpreters. We're not going to be able to fill this workforce need if we don't provide direct support to the people who want to pursue it and encourage people to do it, encourage debt forgiveness, and incentivize people to pursue this field. Without interpreters, forums like this can't happen, but there's so many areas of public life that people won't be able to participate in, and that's an attack on our democracy. It's an attack on people's ability to live freely in New York City, to get through government processes, and it's an affront to a vision of equal rights for everyone and equal participation in the society. So I think thinking about subsidies, debt forgiveness, pipelines for interpreters, and making sure that we're really incentivizing a talented workforce to do this essential service.
Great, thank you very much. Mitchell, I have one specific question for you. You tweeted about a blind refugee in Buffalo who had trouble getting back to his house and was actually killed because he was wrongfully deported and left 5 miles away from his home. How do you protect disabled migrants coming into the city of dreams and assuring them that they are safe here, they can get their accommodations, and they are not denied services that are dire to their survival, that are important to their survival?
It's a heartbreaking story, right? To see what happened in Buffalo. Is a stark reminder of how absolutely broken, unjust, cruel, and inhumane our immigration system is. For 20 years, and for longer than that with family, I've been dealing with immigration. I've been dealing with ICE. I've been dealing with CBP. I was part of the coalition that worked on getting ICE out of Rikers 15 years ago, and I can't believe that we're still having to talk about ICE. We have to dismantle ICE. And by dismantle, I mean this isn't just about this rogue law enforcement agency that is terrorizing our communities on the streets. This is about an entire complex of detention systems and internment camps that are being built around the country, and a surveillance system that this government is utilizing to track not just non-citizens, but also US citizens. And this entire regime needs to be torn down. People forget that the immigration laws, when they were most recently changed, was actually during the Clinton administration, when a lot of the punitive elements of immigration were implemented, the ones that immigration lawyers struggle to navigate every single day. It was during that administration. And that is when we started to make our immigration system so punitive, so cruel, so inhumane, that we could have a situation in which someone is dropped off 5 miles away from their home and are dead because of it. So until we all come together and recognize the fact that our immigration system is absolutely broken, we must change it today. We're not going to get the change we need. And if you look at the polls, the majority of Americans now support some level of reform or abolition of ICE, and actually starting to talk about immigration reform again. I remember protesting in the streets of the city before DACA and DAPA were passed during the Obama administration, and we were so gleefully happy that we were going to get immigration reform. It didn't happen, did it? And we're still 20 years later still talking about it. So until we prioritize changing the way our immigration system works from cruelty and punishment and terror to fairness, to humanity, which is what this country is supposed to be about, we are never going to be able to prevent these situations from continuing to happen.
Thank you. Alright, let's go to healthcare. We're going out of time. This is a simple yes or no question. Are you, I've spoken to state assembly members and city government leaders about the big beautiful bill. And in the legislation, it says that there are some exceptions for people with disabilities and other folks, but those details are not clear. Are any of you educated enough to know what those exceptions are, and how do you protect disabled New Yorkers from these Medicaid cuts? We could start with state assembly members. Clear about this?
I'm so sorry. The audio on Zoom
It was
is
the exceptions in the Medicaid cuts for the disabled community. If you're familiar with what those exceptions are, and how would you ensure that the disabled community is protected with the Medicaid cuts that are coming? Did I get that right, Chris?
Yes. Thank you very much for clarification.
So this is one of the big fights that we are facing right now in Albany. Is the cuts are coming from the federal government. We are in the midst of negotiating a $263 billion state budget, and it is my belief very strongly that we have the resources in New York State to make our communities whole, to make sure that everyone has the health care that they need, that our disability community is protected, that we can pay our home health aides a living wage and treat them with dignity. And it will require raising revenue. It will require taxing the absolute richest New Yorkers, the most profitable corporations, to fill these gaps and many others to advance a just life in New York City and New York State. And so when in Congress we have to overturn the one big, quote unquote, one big beautiful bill, we have to restore those Medicaid cuts. We have to make sure that everyone has the health care and the care that they need and deserve. And we have to acknowledge that the system was very broken even before the Trump administration took office, that the crisis in healthcare has existed for many, many, many years. And it's because healthcare is treated as a private good that you have to sacrifice a lot of money for, And that is contingent on where you live and your employment status, your immigration status, and the only way we're going to have real healthcare justice for our disability community, for our immigrant community, for everyone is if we pass Medicare for all. And when healthcare is truly a human right rather than a good that is profited off of by the health insurance companies and private industry.
Oh, yeah. In the mix with DJ F7. If you like this video, then, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now.
When you study the historic nature of revolutions, the motive of a revolution, the objective of a revolution, and the result of a revolution, and the methods used in a revolution, you may change words. You may devise another program. You may change your goal and you may change your mind. In Danville, Virginia, and other parts of the country, local leaders begin to stir up our people at the grassroots level. This was never done by these Negroes whom you recognize of national stature. They controlled you, but they never incited you or excited you. They controlled you, they contained you. They kept you on the plantation.
The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chopped in its place.
I'd like to point out, though, that
I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberals, who usually pose as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods.
I don't worry. I tell you, I'm a man who believes that I died 20 years ago. And I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.